Right, so I wanted to cover the developmental theories. In particular, we're going to talk and focus primarily on Super's developmental theory. His is very well known and kind of foundational as far as a career counseling theory goes. So the assumptions of any career developmental theory or any lifespan developmental theory is that change and growth happens through a lifelong process. You're making change to adapt to the different situations that you're in particular life roles that you're involved in, the tasks that you have in order to accomplish success in that particular stage, right? So there's oftentimes a stage and then there's tasks that you have to specifically accomplish in order to successfully move on to the next stage within developmental stage models. So the lifespan, life space theory is Donald Super's theory. His theory was developed over an extensive period of time during his career. So it's been added to, there's been several different kind of graphical representations of his different ideas and concepts. So those are really important to kind of take a look at so you can kind of visually see how he is relating all the concepts and components of his theory. So the basic assumptions and premises is that, again, this is a process, a developmental process that unfolds over time. You're going to have multiple jobs and multiple places and multiple roles throughout your lifetime. So it is bringing into a developmental theory some contextual factors that maybe isn't very typical of a developmental theory. So he has some kind of environment pieces and factors that are really important. His theory is considered pretty complex as it has lots of different factors and concepts that kind of interrelate with each other. One of the main pieces of his theory is self-concept and also career maturity. So we're going to talk about those. Again, we talk about stages and tasks, so we're going to go over those. And roles and relationships are also really important. That's kind of that contextual environmental piece that isn't usually involved within a developmental theory. So I don't know if Donald Super would necessarily consider himself a developmental theorist because this is roles and relationships tend to be more of a ecological model. So it's kind of combining two types of models together. Self-concept. So this is a main conceptual piece of his work, and that is that our self-perception, our self-concept grows and develops throughout time and through many different models, through different influences, right? So in the beginning, a lot of it is observing role models work, and we identify with the different role models we see. And then the environmental pieces of, how well we're succeeding or interacting with our own environment, and how that plays a role in how we build the self-concept, the experiences that we have, whether or not we're, doing well in math at school or whether or not we're in an extracurricular sport activity. Those sorts of things all play a role in how we sort of begin to define who we are as a person and how we're going to interact with the world in different roles and in different work tasks. There's also these breakdowns of how he approached it is there are some internal factors that relate to how we are going to end up developing our self-concept. So that can be, your IQ, your aptitude for certain things, the values you may have, some personality factors, some inherited things, right, that are important. It's really what makes up you as a person and how that's going to play a role in how you develop your self-identity. And then the external factors, those contextual pieces that we're talking about, the interactions among other people, among your environment, community, your school, your peers, your family, those situations that play a role as well in how we develop our sense of self or self-concept. So developmental stages within Super's theory is what we're going to talk about next. So the stages here, like all developmental models, they tend to go in order. And sometimes people will criticize the particular age ranges, right, that are within this. And that may shift and change over time as our society changes. So I always kind of, these are the age ranges that he suggests, but I always take those with a grain of salt, right? So oftentimes in today's world, we talk about the expanding of adolescence. The adolescents tend to expand into your early 20s. So that may be something that you consider as well. As a society changes, these ages and age ranges may change. So, but the idea is that we're doing these certain sort of tasks within these stages. So the first stage is growth. So that growth stage is just basically developing your identity in a way, your self-concept, but a capacity for work, a capacity for different work tasks. So what you're good at, what you're not good at, developing those interests, what you really enjoy, what you really don't enjoy. Also identifying your needs, what you value in this world, what you want to get, how you're going to be satisfied. And as a piece of that, your personality is starting to form and develop during that growth stage. So that idea is all coming into play, that we're growing and developing that and taking in information from our different roles and different environment pieces, right, to make that self-concept happen. And then the second stage is explorative stage. This is kind of your teen, early adulthood sort of years, where you're starting to narrow down your options of what you want to do. So you're kind of specifying, that's one of the tasks of this stage, you're specifying what field you really want to be in. So you're going to see a lot of like a trial and error in this stage, either with taking on different jobs and quitting jobs and starting a new job, or oftentimes if you're in college, you'll be changing majors. You take a class and decide, oh, I do not want to do this, and you change majors, right? So that piece is what exploratory stage is all about, is kind of figuring that out, trial and error, narrowing down sort of your options to what you really feel like it will be a satisfying career for you. The establishment stage is basically figuring out how you're going to stay in that chosen career and progress and prosper, basically, and be successful. So that's that understanding and learning your particular career. That could be taking advanced higher education, that could be taking on some more courses, some figuring out how you're going to get promotions, like how does the rank advancement work, those sorts of things within that establishment. So how to basically succeed in the chosen career that you've laid out for yourself. And the maintenance stage is, again, just making those necessary adjustments and balancing. Typically what you're going to see here is that the shifting in roles outside of work sometimes make you need to adjust your career, or making certain things shift or change there. In the declining stage, this is where you're going to be nearing retirement possibly. You may continue to work after retirement in some sort of part-time capacity. Those are kind of the general stages. And I would say that with a lot of developmental models, you have these sort of set stages and timelines, but oftentimes people may go back to another stage. So something may happen in their life that shifts them back to the exploratory stage or the establishment stage. So for example, I've had some clients that their career unexpectedly needed to shift. One example is recently COVID hit and the things changed and lots of careers just shut down. So I had a ballerina who their performances just canceled, nothing. So like her entire company was trying to find new jobs, right? So this idea that now she has to figure out and explore, she had a chosen career, she was maintaining it, but now she has to go back to the drawing board. So she would be going back to that exploratory stage, what works well for her, what is happening. And so that's going to happen for different reasons. Another one in particular is like an accident may cause someone to lose an ability to work in a certain field, right? So they may have to shift to more of a desk sort of job, a sit in front of a computer sort of job, because of a physical disability that occurred out of an accident or things like that. And maybe that technology or that particular field may shift so much that the job that you're in, the career that you're in, just disappears. And then you have to shift again. So that's happened in several different areas where technology takes the place of someone who was in that role. So tasks, these are the things that are going to take place within those stages. And you can kind of identify where these tasks are going to fall within those different stages. So that first task, crystallization, again, that's that narrowing it down. So you're crystallizing what you're interested in, what you're good at, what your self concept of who you want to be within the work realm is going to be. So it's crystallizing. You're getting a solid idea of what your vocational goal will look like. So that's happening during that those adolescent years where you're exploring your interests and trying to figure that out and growing and figuring out who you are and what you want to do. And then specification, that's that narrowing down that we talked about. That trial and error, that is helping you move forward towards your preferred choice. So you can decide, this is not for me, I like this. So that's narrowing down your options to your preferred choice. And then implementation, that's kind of that establishment phase, right? You're competing for others for that preferred occupation, trying to get yourself a job, entering the workforce, those sorts of things. There with that, implementing your career, getting it started, launching yourself. And then stabilization is that you're confirming that this is a good fit for you, you're feeling satisfied, right? That would be the idea. If not, then you're going back to a different stage, right? Going back to the drawing board and maybe specifying again, right? So if it is something that is working well for you, you have the skill set to accomplish it, and you'll establish yourself within that career and stabilize in that. And then consolidation is establishing your career by advancing. So again, it's furthering your knowledge, furthering your skills so you can get promoted and things like that. Become a more valuable person to your company or agency or whatever you're working for. So those are the tasks that are related. So oftentimes when you're working as a career counselor, these are the things that you really are going to end up being your goals, right? So this sets you up to understand, okay, what stage are they in? What tasks are they working on in order to move to the next stage? So you're wanting to kind of figure out those things as you're assessing where your clients are. So like I said, working with somebody who's had to have this unexpected career choice, they oftentimes go back to, okay, what are my other interests? And how can I narrow down the field to something that works for me? So they jump back to a different task and then they have to work through them again. Career maturity is another big concept that super kind of foundational piece of career counseling and the career field is this idea that we have to have some sort of awareness of ourselves, that self-concept, right? We have to have some sort of maturity in planning and accepting responsibility for our choices. So that maturity piece helps us in kind of assessing where our clients are. Are they at the point where they are aware of their preferred career? Are they self-aware? All right, so those pieces that you will be assessing with your clients, where are they on that? Are they really accepting responsibility for making this path, their choices, their career? Are they planning it all? Do they have enough information? Those sorts of things. So these are kind of the 6 dimensions that you're looking at. That first is the orientation to vocational choice, which is basically how solid is that choice that they have, how much information do they have about it, information and planning section, right? Have they made any steps towards that goal? Are they pursuing that within their education? Are they getting it the information they need? Kind of how motivated are they in those areas as well? And then the third one is consistency. Did they shift what they want to do from one year to the next, 1 month to the next? So are they shifting, or are they pretty set on that vocational preference? And sometimes there can be a premature narrowing of what they want to do, and that may be a problem. So you're looking at that as well. So have they just accepted what their parents say they have to do as their vocation, right? And that might be a consistent vocation, but they didn't look at other things as far as their self-concept, their own interests, their own aptitudes, right? So you're looking at that and assessing that piece. The crystallization of traits, that's how well are they self-aware? How well is their self-concept? How like solid is that? Does it shift? Do they have this vacillation of who they really are? And do they have that sense of self-efficacy that they can achieve what they're wanting to do as far as their career choices go? Vocational independence, again, is that shifting back to that consistency. Are they making this decision on their own, or is somebody else chosen this for them? So they may need to reassess that piece. How much of this is their decision versus they're influenced by someone else? And can they make a decision that maybe disappoints other people in their life, and kind of assessing that piece of their career maturity? And then you'll also be looking at their wisdom in that. How realistic are their preferences, and are they consistent with their self-concept? So are they choosing it just because they like money? Are they choosing it because of other things, their family influences, those sorts of things? that really aren't consistent with really what you're seeing as their self-concept. Some of this might be also looking at their aptitude for certain things. I worked at a private college that tended to have more of a wealthy clientele as far as students go. And a lot of them are pushed by their families into the medical field or your STEM fields like math, accounting, and sort of those sorts of things. And a lot of the students that I worked with as they were trying to choose majors and things have been pushed into a field that maybe they were finding as they were taking those courses that they didn't have the aptitude to be successful in. So it's also assessing that piece of, is this really realistic for them to be successful in that? They'd get into those advanced biology classes and go, I can't be a doctor. I am failing this class. And so it's looking at that as well, whether or not that's going to work for them. Life stage model. So I wanted you to kind of look at the graphic schemas. I'm not putting that in here because that's copyrighted, right? But definitely look at the life career rainbow. It has life stages and life space within it. So I think that's important. It's basically putting those stages that we were just talking about and the specific tasks that would be in those stages on a graphical sort of layout. And then as in addition to those life stages, the life roles that will be played by these individuals as they go through life. So there would be student, parent, caretaker, right? So there's different roles we play within our families and our communities that also may shift and influence the way where we are in our career tasks as well, right? So if you're taking care of children as well as elderly parents, then you may have to take back some and rebalance some your career. So maybe your career doesn't have flexible hours, you need flexible hours, so then you may have to shift, right? So it's understanding some environmental context that is playing a role in those stages as well. The archway model has some societal factors, right? The society, the community that we live in also impacts us. So that may be laws, labor laws, things like that interact with us. It may be student loans, how that works. It may be how the college higher ed system works, and how they're interacting with our own personal, biological, and psychological sort of traits, who we are as an individual. So those internal and external factors, situations that are going to play a role as well in how we develop our careers over time. So the archway model is more societal, whereas the life career rainbow is more relational. It's those relational pieces that influence our career decisions and choices. So in applying Super's life space, lifespan sort of theory into a career counseling setting, you're going to be doing an assessment. This is common, any kind of career thing, you're going to be looking at assessments, you're gathering information. And a lot of this is on the life structure and work role salient. So you're looking at the different roles they play in their life, how they want their lifestyle structured, right? And whether or not there's balance there, or whether that's working for them or not, if they need to shift in that piece. So you're going to be assessing their lifestyle, their work-life balance, how their self-concept also plays into those components of their roles and their work tasks. So there's a big piece there of gathering those sorts of information. And then you're going to be, of course, gathering some history on that, right? So their past history in work environments and work situations. You're going to assess where they are in their developmental stages, what resources they have to meet the task that's specific to that stage, right? Their identity, self-concept, values, interests, abilities, aptitudes, those sorts of things. So you can do that with lots of different career assessments as well. And then occupational self-concepts and life themes is also part of that. So once you get all of that information, which is a ton of information, you're going to try to integrate it into some sort of summary for your client so they can understand what you're seeing as far as this theory and where they are and what stage they're in and what their next steps are in order to achieve the tasks that they have as far as their goals. And then you're going to put those goals into the model, basically. So it's going to be based on the client's self-concept. So it's going to be specific to your client, but it's also going to incorporate those tasks. So this different tasks that they have at each stage. So crystallization versus specification, right? It's looking at that so they can complete their developmental process, but it's very client specific to the self-concepts that they have and the work roles that they want to have for themselves. So again, those procedures, again, are based on the task. So you have those counseling goals, but you have like the steps in how to get there that helps move them through each of the stages that they may be. And then the process of that from there is a lot of educating, getting them some resources, coaching them on things, maybe, doing some role play for the different tasks that they may be accomplishing or doing there. You can be more directive or non-directive depending on where they are and what task and stage they are and what they're needing. So it can look very different depending on your client and where they are on their life stage task development. As far as the research behind careers, lifespan, life space theory, predominantly it's a positive. Obviously it's in your textbook, so it's considered pretty foundational as far as career theories and kind of spin-offs from that. It definitely impacted research on career maturity and self-concept and how that plays a role in career tasks and career development. So it definitely has a huge impact on the field. A lot of people believe that it offers a process of career development that's important to consider in working with clients. Some of the negative criticisms, I guess, of a theory is that it doesn't have some significance in some cultures. So some research studies that have been done are saying that it may not apply in certain cultures. So I believe that was in Nigeria. There may be some others, right, that are out there, some research that says it's not necessarily effective for all people. It does not have testable hypothesis is another big one. So there's a lot of vague kind of constructs or really big complex constructs that are difficult to assess within a research study, right? So that makes it a little bit tricky to evaluate. And then the third bullet there is that the breadth of the theory, right? The complexity and the interacting factors make it really hard to narrow down in a research study as well. So the other theory that I wanted to discuss is a developmental theory, Goffredson's theory of circumscription and compromise. Sorry. And we're just going to touch on it briefly, so it shouldn't take too long. Goffredson's theory is a biosocial development approach. The self-concept, again, is a key factor in the career selection. So how we define who we are and how that happens is really important. The social economic background and intellectual level greatly influence where we believe we can be, our self-efficacy, our self-concept within the dominant society. Cognitive maps, right? So we're creating these ideas and schemas of occupations, and we base our choice upon those. And so that's that circumscription compromise, right? We have to like figure out what job fits us kind of and within that, and we're going to compromise based on our cognitive maps of who we are and what's acceptable within the environment around us. So some of those things are talking about limits of tolerable jobs based on job level, educational level. She talks about sex type, but I believe that's more gender. She would use the word gender now. Gender typing, masculine, feminine type tasks, those sorts of things. It's the idea that we are creating our identity through work, a social identity of how we're interacting with others through work. So her theory goes only through adolescence. So that is one of the things it's criticized for, but it is basically on how we develop our career schema through childhood and adolescence. So the first is orientation to size and power. That's that first stage, which is influenced by basically what it means to be child versus adult. Right? So that size and power piece. I'm little, how much power do I have versus how much power an adult has? So that's kind of foundational that in that part. Then the next stage, 6 to 8 years old, and this is very typical of just development as far as gender and roles go there. So you'll look at, gender and how that plays a role, and you'll see that, boys tend to play with other boys and girls tend to play with other girls at that stage, what it means to be feminine versus masculine. So for example, it's like first, second grade. My daughter went to first grade and came back after school all disappointed because she was told at school that girls are not supposed to like Transformers. So again, it's that piece of what it means to be what gender you are in school. So they're beginning to interact with their peers through that school system, and that's where they're finding that influence, right, of what it means to be girl versus boy in those elementary school years. Then you have the social validation years, that's preteen. So that's kind of that concept of social class. Who has money, who doesn't, who wears new clothes, who doesn't, those sorts of things, and yourself and your place within the society as far as economic situation goes. So you'll begin to see that kids that age tend to group off as well. So you may lose a friend that maybe has more money than you or has less money than you, and you'll end up kind of gravitating to people within the same SES in that stage. And then the fourth one, the last one, is finding your unique identity, really, right? So that's your teenage years, that middle school through high school sort of years, where you're trying to figure out who you are. So there's a lot of identity crisis. If you're matching this with Erickson's stages, that identity crisis stage is what we're talking about here, where you're growing this self-awareness of who you are, you're metacogniting about like what that means to be who you are in the society that you're in. You have this very strong awareness of others and their perceptions of you. I don't know how many times teenagers will talk about they, blah, 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 right? And this idea that everyone is judging you and everybody is watching you, sort of introspection right there. So trying to fit in and figuring out who you are, but making the idea of finding your group, finding your tribe, that is kind of what's happening there. So within her theory, these concepts are really important. That self-concept, that's just really that growth concept of who we are and identifying our identity, right? Our different intersecting identities and how they're going to play a role in our occupational choice. The cognitive maps and images of occupations, right? So what it means and where you fit within that, and if it's okay for you to fit within that role, or if you're not going to fit within that role. That social spaces piece is important, like where you fit in society, and how your job places you within the social space as well, right? And then circumscription and compromise is basically that narrowing down idea of this is where you fit within a work role, given who you are, right? Given where you are in that cognitive map of the world and the job situation. So one of the main goals here is to encourage the clients to be realistic in their occupational choices, and in exploring occupational goals. You want them to have some options, right? So it's assessing that, what is it they're considering doing, and then also, are they willing to look at other options? Indecision is basically an unwillingness to attempt to choose, maybe a sign of like a red flag of kind of they're not fitting, their self-concept isn't well formed, or their cognitive maps of careers and social place aren't adequate. They just may have a lot of anxiety about choosing something outside of what their cognitive map says is okay or tolerable. And then the second thing you're assessing is whether their interests and abilities are adequate for the occupation they're interested in, right? So is this really going to fit them? And then the third is the satisfaction. So how satisfied are they with the choices that they have? What they're influencing those choices, right? Is it acceptable compromises of your interest, gender, family situation, right? So it's basically evaluating all those values and how are they prioritizing them, and is it an acceptable compromise on all those different values and how you see yourself with the world and your family. And then the fourth is if they have not unnecessarily restricted your choice. So again, are you narrowing it down too much and not looking at alternatives that might be a better fit? So kind of asking that question of the clients and assessing that piece. And then making sure they're aware of the barriers, obstacles, the resources they may need in order to reach their goals. So are they being really realistic and what it takes to make it to where they're wanting to go with that? So again, it's going to be a lot of assessing, making those goals, those plans, and then putting them into place so they can help get them through those different stages and tasks. Again, as I mentioned, when we go through the stages, it's criticized primarily because it's limited to children, and so that it's not necessarily as applicable with your work as adults. So these are two, again, developmental theories of career counseling. There are several others. These are two of the most foundational ones, and two that I wanted to just discuss. But the idea is that you're going to grow and develop over time. That's true of all developmental theories, that there's going to be certain tasks that you are going to be accomplishing. So you're going to always be assessing for those, and what's going to take, what is it going to take for your client to move from one task into another stage, right? So they have to accomplish that task to move to another stage. So those are how you're going to be assessing clients, how you're going to conceptualize clients, and then how you're going to set those goals so you can move them through those developmental stages. So that's very true of both of these, that you'll want to be doing that. So if you have any questions, reach out to me, let me know. We'll wrap this up.